This week on In Post, boosting color and detail to make an architecture photo sing. Hi everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome back to In Post. And today I'm going to be processing an image that I showed you from the In the Field episode earlier in the week of the Puerta de Alcalá in Madrid. And today's photo is all about getting the color right and getting the detail on the subject right so that the architecture really stands out and jumps out. Now, before I dive into the processing today, I want to ask for your support of the show, and it's very easy for you to do. You've seen me use ON1 software lots and lots of times in these videos. It's my software of choice for doing final stylization. They're coming out with a new product, ON1 Photo 10, and if you are thinking about buying it or you're thinking about upgrading your current copy, I'd like you to head over to my website and use my affiliate link. It doesn't cost you anything additional. It does give me a small percentage of the sale, and that helps me come back week after week, putting up new content, new videos, and loads of ON1 tips. So that's it. Hope you are able to do that for me. And with that, let's get into today's photo and start off in Lightroom, and we'll finish it up in ON1. So let's take a look at a couple of things in Lightroom here, basic adjustments and so forth. But I want to point out where I realized I needed to move from Lightroom into the photo suite and what really prompted me to do that. So I'll make our screen a little bit bigger there. And first, let's just go to initial basic adjustments. So load that up here. \key. This is out of the camera. And then just some basic adjustments for lens corrections and in basic panel. So normal, temperature, chose something in this grayish area for the, the white balance point. Minor tweak on contrast, brought the highlights down to recover some of the detail on the arches. Shadows brought way up. That was primarily the foreground. You can see that was kind of dark. Brought that up. And then a little bit of clarity and quite a bit of color adjustment, vibrance and saturation over here. So you can see the sky was a little duller. That brought things up. And I was really looking at the foreground for this too, the greens and the reds that are in the foreground here. From here, noticed a few other things that needed tweaking and touching. So let's go to the next thing. Hue, saturation, let me try that again. Hue, saturation, and luminance. And this was primarily for the sky. You can see that the blues are brought up. And again, I was watching these flowers. I liked the flowers. I was trying to bring the reds up higher, so you can see the red saturation was brought up. And here's where I started to feel a little constrained in Lightroom. I wanted to control red by itself, and this panel is affecting everything overall. You can see a bunch of red tinges coming into the base of these columns here. It's like, all right, well, let me keep going. I know I've got brushes and filter brushes and so forth to try out, so that's where I went next. And the filter brushes, load that snapshot in. Come on, computer. There we go. And so let's take a look at where those brush points are. You can see there's one right here. If I hover over that, you can see I brushed away a lot of the saturation and the color from this area. We click on it, set that here. So here's our saturation point. So removing a lot of the color from the base of these columns. And that's what made the red tinge go away. And I still wasn't incredibly happy with the foreground. The detail in the building was okay, but this foreground felt a little dull. I did go so far as to try and finish things off. I'll toggle this back on for you. You can see an effect. I added to my normal vignette at the end, but it was about here that I decided I wasn't quite happy and I wanted more control. So I jumped this over into the photo suite to do some more work on it. So let's do that right now. Let me pop over to Photo Suite and show you what I did from this point forward. I brought the photos straight into Perfect Effects because I knew right away I want to work on this foreground. This is what started catching my eye. The color here just felt off. It's a little bright. Maybe I brought the shadows up a little too high. I wanted some red, I wanted some green, but not to distract from the building. So started with the color enhancer, and you can see from the mask, we'll see that show up here in just a moment, that I'm only applying this color to the lower portion of the frame, really the reds and the greens here. And so in the color changes, I've brought the green brightness up a little bit. That's just to add a little brightness to the grass itself. I think I changed the yellow channel to shift that more toward green, a little more saturated. Again, enriching the greens and giving it more of an overall cooler tone, not so much in the yellow sides of things. And then in the reds and oranges, reds didn't change anything. Orange, I think, shifted much more toward red. And that was to bring these flowers down in color, change that hue. If I were to bring this back to where it was, maybe a subtle change on the video. I'll bring the saturation up too. You can see that these are kind of overpowering, at least for my tastes. I like that this gives the, this building or structure, context, but I don't want the colors of these flowers to take my eyes away from what I really want you to look at. Let me undo those two changes. And so this is about where I ended up, where this is toned down enough that I was happy with it. And now since I'm in Perfect Effects, I'll add some contrast to the building. So my favorite dynamic contrast. You see that's punched up the building quite a bit. Started with a natural setting, increased the smalls ever so slightly just to get some of the brickwork to really pop. And I backed off the large slider some. I think it defaults to about 20. And masked this in using the masking brush here so that I could just paint it over the particular building. And the way I did that was kind of a really big lazy brush stroke all over the building. You can see that here, right? All the way through here. This was a gradient. It was very simple. I actually was able to copy the mask from the color enhancer, place it down here and invert it. But then using the perfect brush, here we go, the perfect brush to take things away from the sky. And that's a good technique for masking, where you can take something like this, and let's say I want to add the effect in, and I just paint a whole bunch of stuff all through here, and I've covered all the edges of my building, and that's great. I don't want the effect on the sky. Control M for one moment here. The sky is a nice uniform color, and that is great for something like the perfect brush. So now pressing the X key to switch into paint out mode, and now it's very easy for me to get in here and paint this stuff away without having to worry about hitting the building. And I can finish it off just using a refine brush and sweeping through there, just to have it clean up and take care of any more of those blues that might happen to be missing. And that was the technique for this. The refine brush, a lot of times we use it with the quick mask. You can use it for any mask, and it will refine the mask based on what you've done. So here, the software is smart enough to know you don't want anything on this nice deep blue, and I'll refine a mask for you to make sure that's done to your satisfaction. And then last but not least, a vignette, very subtle one. I usually start with subtle and then tweak the various sliders accordingly. That's also having the effect of downplaying the foreground a little bit. If I bring the feather all the way to 0, you can see that this vignette is slightly shifted upward. Using the crosshairs, you drop that on here and you can drag the vignette around. I might as well do that. You can drag the vignette around, and so you can highlight just exactly what you want. So I positioned it, more or less center, but ever so slightly upward. So there's a little more darkness here, a little less here, and all of that helps guide your eye to the building itself. So there we go. I started off doing all this in Lightroom, and I got to a certain point where it's like, I can do this more quickly and more efficiently with the ON1 suite, and in particular, dynamic contrast was going to give me just what I wanted, and then the color enhancer was going to give me the control I wanted for those colors at the lower part of the frame. So the tip of the week is really to treat your image with your subject in mind. So you saw I downplayed some color in the foreground so that my eye would not be drawn to that lower part of the frame, and added much needed boost of contrast, local contrast, to the structure itself. That's going to jump out of the frame. So that's all those things are done to support the subject of the photo. So that is it for this week in post. Thank you for joining me. I hope you picked up some tips you can use on your photography. And speaking of your photography, I'd like to get your questions. If you have a question about post-processing or about photography in general, let me know, shout at me. You can get me through my website. You can contact me through Twitter's good. Google Plus is so-so. Some of the comments sometimes get lost. Comments on the YouTube videos, those I'm very reliable in getting those. I'd love to hear from you. And if I can answer one of those questions, it might even turn into a future in-post episode. So until next time, happy shooting. My name's Scott Davenport. Thank you.